The Airbus A320 moved calmly through the evening sky at 36,000 feet, its engines humming with steady confidence. Passengers relaxed in their seats, unaware of the danger slowly unfolding ahead. But in seat 22F, an 11-year-old girl named Lina Torres sat quietly, her feet not touching the floor. She wore a bright yellow hoodie, her hair tied in a loose ponytail, and a star-decorated backpack rested under the seat in front of her. To everyone around her, Lina looked like a shy kid traveling alone, maybe nervous, maybe excited. No one knew she carried knowledge far beyond her age, knowledge that would soon matter more than anything. A smiling flight attendant bent down and spoke softly. "Is this your first time flying alone, sweetheart?" Lina nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am." The woman showed her the call button, explaining it slowly, as if Lina did not understand simple things. Lina smiled back, though she felt the familiar sting of being underestimated. She was used to it. Adults always saw her as small, delicate, incapable. Only one person in her life had ever looked at her differently: her grandfather, Captain Rafael Torres. Grandpa Raf had been an Air Force pilot before flying commercial jets. When he retired, he became Lina's closest friend. Her parents worked long shifts, so she spent afternoons in his office, surrounded by flight manuals, model aircraft, and a large simulator screen. Instead of typical games, her grandfather taught her how to read cockpit displays, how to understand engine data, and how to stay calm in emergencies. "The world is unpredictable," he always told her. "If you learn how things work, you never have to feel helpless." Her mother had complained, saying it was too much for a kid, but Grandpa Raf insisted he was not training her to be a pilot. He was teaching her to survive. Now, high above the clouds, Lina looked out the window as the sunset painted the sky in soft colors. She felt a tiny shake under her seat, a jolt sharper than normal turbulence. Her eyes narrowed. That was not a simple bump. That felt like something inside the aircraft struggling. In the cockpit, the warning signs had already begun. Screens flickered, the autopilot clicked off with a loud alarm, and the controls grew heavy in the pilot's hands. "Hydraulic pressure is dropping," the first officer said, panic rising in her voice. "System A is down." The captain tried to correct the sudden bank to the right, but the controls felt wrong, sluggish, and loose. Alarms echoed across the cockpit as system after system flickered and failed. In the cabin, passengers gasped as the airplane lurched sharply. Drinks spilled, overhead bins rattled, and someone screamed when the plane rolled to the left. Lina felt her heartbeat speed up, but her mind sharpened. This was not turbulence. This was a major failure. A deadly one. Another violent jolt sent the aircraft downward. Oxygen masks shot from the ceiling. People began crying, shouting, praying. The flight attendants tried to move, but the shaking was too strong. Lina gripped her armrests, remembering her grandfather's voice. "In an emergency, breathe. Think. Then act." Up front, disaster struck fast. A final surge caused both pilots to slam their heads against the panel. The captain fell unconscious first, then the first officer collapsed beside him. Their hands slipped from the controls as the aircraft dropped into a steep, uncontrolled descent. The warning alarms screamed louder. With no pilots and failing hydraulics, the plane spiraled downward like a wounded bird. People cried out in terror. A flight attendant grabbed the intercom, yelling for help, asking if anyone on board was a pilot. No one answered. A man stood shakily, admitting he had flown small planes decades ago, but even he looked terrified. Lina swallowed hard. She was just a girl. Who would believe her? Yet something deeper than fear pushed her forward. She unbuckled her seatbelt. Her legs trembled, but she stood anyway. Her grandfather's voice echoed again. "If you can help, you must." And Lina stepped into the aisle, small, scared, but ready. Lina stepped into the aisle, gripping the seatbacks as the aircraft shook violently. Passengers stared at her in confusion, some crying, some frozen with fear. A flight attendant struggled to keep her balance as she moved toward the front. "Is there any trained pilot on board?" she shouted again, her voice nearly drowned by the alarms and panicked screams. The man who claimed he had flown small planes years ago looked pale, clutching a seat as the plane dipped again. "I can try, but this is not like flying a small Cessna," he admitted, trembling. The attendant's face fell. They needed more than a maybe. They needed control. They needed knowledge. They needed someone who understood emergencies under pressure. Lina took a shaky breath and forced her voice out. "Ma'am, I can help." The attendant didn't even turn at first. It was too soft, too small, too unbelievable. Lina tried again, louder this time. "Ma'am, I can help. I know how to fly." The woman spun around, shocked. "Sweetheart, this is not the time to pretend. Sit down and put your mask on." Her tone was firm, but fear cracked at the edges. Another violent drop hurled her forward. Lina held her ground. "I'm not pretending. My grandfather is Captain Lina Torres. I've trained with him for 3 years. I know emergency controls. I know manual systems. I know what to do." The man with small aircraft experience turned toward her. "Kid, this is a jet. A real one. You can't. I can read instruments." Lina insisted, eyes determined, hands shaking. "I know how hydraulics work. I know how they fail. If we don't act now, we don't have much time." The plane dropped hard again. Someone screamed. Baggage tumbled from overhead bins. Panic spread like wildfire. The attendant stared into the girl's eyes and saw something she did not expect. Focus, knowledge, certainty. "How old are you?" she whispered. 11, Lina answered, her voice steady. "But I know more about emergencies than anyone else here. Please, let me try." The attendant hesitated for only a second more before grabbing the man and Lina. "Both of you, come with me." As they pushed forward through the rocking cabin, passengers stared in disbelief. The sight of a little girl being taken toward the cockpit should have seemed absurd, but in that moment, hope came in the shape of someone they least expected. Lina's tiny hands gripped the walls as she moved. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it over the alarms. Her legs trembled, but her resolve did not. When they reached the cockpit door, the attendant unlocked it with the emergency key. The door swung open, revealing a nightmare. Both pilots were slumped over, unconscious. Warning lights flashed across the panels like a storm of red fire. The control columns moved with jerky, unnatural motions as the aircraft spiraled. Lina felt tears sting her eyes for a split second, but she swallowed them down. No time for fear. She climbed into the first officer's seat. She had to scoot forward until her toes barely reached the rudder pedals. Her hands settled on the yoke. It felt far heavier than the simulator's plastic controls. "Altitude," she called out. The man read it off the display. "We're dropping fast, 9,000 feet, and falling." Lina's stomach clenched. They were losing altitude too quickly. "Hydraulic systems?" she asked, scanning the flickering warning panel. "All 3 are down," the man said, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "We've lost power assist." Lina nodded tightly. "Then we're in manual reversion. That means the aircraft is flying through cables only. No hydraulics. No help. Just force." She pulled the yoke back with all her strength. Her arms strained, shaking. The aircraft responded slowly, like dragging a stubborn giant upward inch by inch. "Come on, please," she whispered through clenched teeth. The man watched the altitude numbers. 7,000, still falling, but slower. Lina pulled harder. Her shoulders burned. Her hands ached. But she didn't stop. 6,000, descent rate decreasing. 5,000. We're leveling. With one final pull, the plane steadied, the violent nose-down drop ending in a shaky but stable glide. Lina gasped for breath, arms trembling, sweat forming on her forehead. The cockpit fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the warning chimes still echoing in the background. The attendant stared at her with wide eyes. You stopped the fall," she whispered. Lina didn't look away from the instruments. "We're alive for now," she said softly. "But we're not safe yet. I can't hold this forever. We need to find an airport." Her arms were already shaking from exhaustion. She knew this was only the beginning. And she also knew she was the only chance they had left. Lina kept her trembling hands on the yoke, fighting to keep the aircraft level as it groaned in protest. Every few seconds, the plane tried to dip or roll, and she had to counter it with all the strength her small arms could give. Sweat gathered on her forehead. Her shoulders burned. She could feel her muscles tightening, already close to their limit. The man, Mr. Harris, watched the altitude like his life depended on it. "Holding at around 5,000 feet, he said, trying to sound calm, though his voice trembled. The flight attendant stood behind them, gripping the doorway, eyes wide with fear and hope mixed together. "We need to pick an airport," Lina said, forcing her breathing to steady. "I can't fly like this for long." She scanned the navigation screen. her fingers tapping buttons she recognized from hours of simulator training. "Where are we?" "Still west of Santa Fe," Mr. Harris replied, squinting at the display. "Phoenix is behind us. Denver too far." Lina studied the map. The letters and symbols blurred for a moment from the shaking, but she blinked hard and refocused. "Albuquerque," she said. "Big airport. Long runways. Can you get us there?" the attendant asked, almost afraid of the answer. "I have to," Lina replied. "There's no one else." She pushed the right rudder pedal gently, trying to begin a slow turn. The aircraft resisted her, like a stubborn beast refusing to obey. She pushed again, harder this time. Her foot strained. The yoke trembled in her hands. Finally, the aircraft began a slow bank to the right. "Altitude holding," she gasped. "Still around 5,000, Mr. Harris confirmed." "You're doing it." Lina didn't let herself smile. She couldn't. Not yet. The turn took forever. Every inch of movement felt like dragging a mountain across the sky. Her arms quivered with each correction. But at last, the nose pointed south toward Albuquerque. "Okay," she whispered. "Now we try to hold this course." She forced the yoke into a neutral position, but the aircraft kept sagging to the left. She corrected. Then it sagged right. She corrected again. It was like fighting waves in a storm. In the cabin, passengers felt the motion ease slightly. People cried softly, prayed, or simply stared ahead in shock. None of them knew a child was fighting the plane into submission. Maria, the attendant, hurried back to the cockpit. "The passengers are calmer," she said. "I told them the situation is under control." Lina didn't look away from the instruments. "How long to Albuquerque?" Mr. Harris checked the display. "Maybe 30 minutes." Lina's arms dropped for a second in exhaustion. The nose dipped immediately. Alarms chirped. She grabbed the yoke again. "I can't hold this for 30 minutes alone." "I'll help," Mr. Harris said quickly. He reached for the captain's yoke, steadying it from his side. "Tell me when to pull or push." "I'll follow you." Lina nodded. "We work together. You watch altitude and heading. I'll keep the feel of the controls." Minutes dragged like hours. Lina's arms grew heavier with every correction. Her fingers tingled. Her shoulders throbbed. The aircraft fought them constantly, dipping, swaying, trembling like it wanted to fall out of the sky. "Altitude 4,800, Mr. Harris called out. "Pull a little," Lina murmured. Together they pulled. The descent slowed. "Hold it there." The radio hissed with static as Lina tried to send out a distress call. "Mayday, mayday, this is Flight 382, requesting emergency landing." No response. The electrical failure had weakened their communication signal. She tried again. Nothing. They were on their own. "City in sight," Mr. Harris said suddenly, pointing through the windshield. Lina's eyes lifted for the first time in minutes. There it was, Albuquerque, its lights glowing faintly in the dimming sky. Hope flickered inside her chest. "We still need to descend," she said. "But slow. Very slow." She eased the throttle back, careful not to make the aircraft drop too fast. The engines quieted. The nose tilted downward. "Altitude 4,000, 3,900, Mr. Harris read, steady but tense. "We're too high to land yet," Lina whispered. "We need time to line up." She banked the aircraft slightly left to create a wide arc around the airport. The turn strained every muscle in her arms. Her breaths became short and shaky. "Altitude 3,700. Good, we hold it." As they approached the airport's northern side, Lina straightened the aircraft. The runways came into view, long, silver strips shining under the fading sun. She felt a surge of fear and determination mix inside her chest. "Okay," she breathed. "This is it. We're going to land." But her legs were shaking. Her arms were numb. And the hardest part was still ahead. The runways stretched ahead like two thin lifelines in the fading evening light, and Lina felt her heart thump against her ribs. Her hands were shaking so badly the yoke trembled with them. She tightened her grip, forcing her fingers to stay steady. "We need to begin our final descent," she said softly, almost to herself. Mr. Harris nodded, eyes glued to the altitude indicator. 2,900 feet, he read aloud. "We should start dropping a little faster." Lina eased the throttle back further, careful not to lose too much speed. The engines softened to a gentle hum, and the aircraft dipped toward the city. She scanned the skyline, looking for the precise angle to approach the runway. Her mind replayed every simulator session her grandfather had ever given her. Into the wind gives more control. Long runway helps flare at the right moment. But this wasn't a simulator. There was no rest button, no safe restart. This was real, and every soul on board depended on her. The aircraft shuddered again, a reminder that its systems were failing more each minute. "We've got the airport to our right," Mr. Harris said. "We need to swing around." "I know," Lina answered, gripping the yoke tighter. She pushed the left rudder pedal and gently pulled the yoke left, trying to begin the final turn. The aircraft resisted her, its heavy frame refusing to cooperate. "Come on," she muttered. "Turn, please turn." She pushed harder. The muscles in her legs screamed. Her arms trembled. Slowly, so slowly the motion was barely visible, the aircraft began to arc to the left. Passengers in the cabin felt the shift, clutching their armrests as the plane rolled just enough to worry them. Some whispered prayers. Others cried quietly, exhausted from fear. Maria, the flight attendant, moved to the cockpit again, her face drained. "Everyone is in their seats," she said. "But they're scared, really scared." "We're all scared," Lina whispered, though she kept her eyes locked on the instruments. "But we're almost there." "Altitude 2,300, Mr. Harris called out. "Still dropping steady." "That's good. Keep reading it." Lina leaned forward, peering through the windshield. The runway now aligned ahead, straight and unmistakable. "This is our final approach," she said. "Get ready. It's going to be rough." Her voice shook, but not from fear. Her arms were close to giving out. She reached for the landing gear lever. Her hand hovered for a second. "Please work," she whispered. Then she pulled it down. A grinding noise filled the cockpit, making her chest clench with dread. Then, thunk, 3 small green lights blinked on. "Gear down and locked," Mr. Harris announced, relief washing over his face. Lina let out a breath she'd been holding too long. "Okay, we can do this." But the hardest part still waited in front of them. The runway loomed closer, long but not endless. And the aircraft was still too fast, much too fast. "I'm going to idle the engines," Lina said. She pushed the throttle levers to full idle. The roar faded to a whisper. The nose dipped, and the aircraft sank toward the runway. "Altitude 1,800, 1,600, Mr. Harris reported quickly, tension rising in his voice. "Keep calling it," Lina said. "Don't stop." Her arms burned, fire spreading up to her shoulders. Each small correction felt like lifting a heavy barbell. The yoke fought her every second. "Altitude 1,000, he read. 900, 800. "We're lined up," Lina breathed. "Now we hold this path." The runway raced toward them. The plane descended too fast, but Lina couldn't flare yet. Not too early, not too late. She waited, heart hammering against her ribs. 500. Her breath caught. 400. Almost. 300. "Mr. Harris, get ready to pull with me," she said. He placed both hands on his yoke. "Just say when." The ground sped closer. The end lights of the runway glowed brighter. 200. Lina tightened her grip, summoning the last strength she had. 100. "Now. Pull," she shouted. Both of them pulled back with everything inside them. Lina felt her arms scream in agony. Her fingers nearly slipped. The aircraft's nose inched upward, then steadied into a flare. "Hold it," she gasped. The wheels slammed into the runway with a deafening impact. The entire aircraft bounced back into the air. Passengers screamed. Lina held tight, refusing to let go. "Again," she cried. They pulled once more. The plane hit the runway a second time, hard, but this time it stayed down. "Brakes!" Lina yelled. She stomped on the pedals, her small legs straining. Mr. Harris pushed too. The tires screeched. Smoke burst from beneath the wings. The plane rumbled violently as it sped across the runway, slowing but not fast enough. Speed 170, 140, 120. The runway in was growing closer, far too close. "Come on," Lina cried. 80, 60. The aircraft screeched toward the end. And finally, stopped. Silence. Deep, overwhelming silence. Lina sagged forward, her hands slipping from the yoke. Her arms felt like jelly. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear, but from sheer exhaustion. We stopped," she whispered. "We did," Mr. Harris said, half laughing, half crying. "You did it." Behind them, the cabin erupted in cheers. But Lina only closed her eyes, breathing hard, knowing the impossible part was finally over. For several long seconds, Lina could only hear her own heartbeat echoing inside her head. Her arms trembled uncontrollably, her fingers numb from gripping the yoke so hard. Every muscle in her body felt drained. She blinked, trying to steady her breathing. The aircraft was no longer moving. The danger was finally over. But it felt unreal, like her mind had not yet caught up with the fact that all 148 passengers were alive because she refused to give up. Mr. Harris leaned back in his seat, wiping tears from his eyes. "I can't believe it," he whispered. You actually landed us." His voice shook with pure disbelief. Maria rushed into the cockpit, nearly tripping from emotion alone. "Everyone is safe," she cried. "No serious injuries. Just shaken. You saved them, Lina." She reached forward and gently touched the girl's shoulder, afraid she might break if touched too hard. But Lina barely reacted. She stared at the quiet runway ahead, her chest rising and falling in rapid breaths. Emergency vehicles surrounded the plane within minutes, red and blue lights flashing through the cockpit windows. Paramedics boarded quickly, heading straight for the unconscious pilots. Mr. Harris stepped aside to let them work. One paramedic turned and looked at Lina with surprise. "She's the one who flew it?" he asked Maria in disbelief. Maria nodded, her eyes still wet. "Yes, she kept us all alive." The paramedic stared at Lina, as if seeing something impossible. "You're a hero," he said softly. But Lina shook her head. "I just did what I had to." As they helped her out of the seat, her legs nearly gave out. She had used every ounce of strength her small body had. Maria quickly caught her and guided her into the cabin. The moment Lina stepped through the cockpit doorway, the entire cabin fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the little girl standing there, skin pale, hands trembling, hair messy from the chaos. And then, like a wave, people began to rise from their seats. It started with one person clapping, then another. Then the entire plane erupted in applause so loud it felt like the cabin might lift off again. People were crying, shouting her name, reaching out to touch her shoulder or hand as she walked down the aisle. "You saved my children," one mother sobbed, pulling her close before Maria gently moved Lina onward. An elderly man held his chest and whispered, "You were our miracle." A teenager wiped his tears and whispered, "You're braver than any adult I've ever seen." Lina felt overwhelmed. She didn't know how to react. She only wanted her family, her parents' hugs, her grandfather's steady voice. The cheering passengers blurred together as she was guided off the plane. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters yelled, officials rushed forward, and the crowd grew larger with every passing second. Someone tried to interview her immediately, but Maria stepped in firmly. "She's just a child. She needs her family first." An FAA official approached, an older woman with silver hair and calm, sharp eyes. She kneeled to meet Lina's height. "Are you Lina Torres?" "Yes, ma'am," Lina whispered. "My name is Karen Lewis with the FAA. I need to understand exactly what happened." "You're 11 years old, correct?" "Yes." "And you flew and landed a malfunctioning Airbus with failed hydraulics?" "Yes, ma'am." Lewis exhaled slowly. "That is extraordinary. You saved every single life on that plane." Lina's lips trembled. "Can I call my family now?" "They're already on their way," Lewis said gently. "They'll be here soon." Those words finally cracked the last wall inside Lina. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She wasn't crying from fear. She was crying because she wanted her grandfather. She wanted the man who taught her everything she used today. While officials guided her into a quiet area of the terminal, Lina answered question after question. They asked how she recognized hydraulic failure, how she managed manual reversion, how she kept calm. She explained in soft, shaky sentences. She told them about her grandfather's training, the simulator hours, the lessons at home. Their expressions changed from disbelief to awe with every detail she shared. Then the doors burst open. Her parents ran inside first, eyes full of panic and love. Her mother scooped her into the tightest hug she had ever given. "My baby," she sobbed. "My brave girl." Lina clung to her, finally letting the weight of everything fall. Her father held her next, his voice cracking. "You saved all those people, and you're still my little girl." But Lina kept looking past them. And then she saw him. Grandpa Raff stood just behind them, tears filling his weathered eyes. He approached slowly, as if afraid she might disappear. Lina broke free from her parents, and ran into his arms. He lifted her easily, holding her like he used to when she was small. His voice trembled as he whispered, "I'm so proud of you, Mia Estrella. But you must be exhausted." She nodded against his shoulder. "I remembered everything you taught me," she whispered. "And you used it," he replied softly, "when it truly mattered." For the first time since the nightmare began, Lina felt safe. Truly safe. But this was only the beginning of what the world was about to learn about the girl from seat 22F. The next few hours passed in a blur for Lina. She stayed close to her grandfather and parents as investigators, airport officials, and medical staff moved around her, asking gentle questions and offering warm blankets and water. Her small body still shook from exhaustion, but her mind replayed every moment of the flight, the alarms, the shaking cabin, the heavy yoke, the desperate landing. She still wasn't sure how she managed to stay calm. It was as if her grandfather's voice had guided her through every impossible second. By the time the official report was drafted, the truth became clear to everyone. A rare electrical failure had caused the hydraulic systems to collapse and triggered a chain reaction that disabled the pilots. Without Lina's intervention, the aircraft would have spiraled into the ground in less than 4 minutes. She prevented one of the worst aviation tragedies in recent history, an FAA inspector said during a press briefing. Her knowledge and composure were beyond remarkable. They were life-saving. News of the incident spread across the country by evening and reached international media within hours. Headlines appeared everywhere. 11-year-old saves plane load of passengers. Child hero lands disabled jet. Youngest emergency pilot in history. Television trucks arrived at the airport. Reporters rushed inside. And the world wanted to know the face of the girl who had done the impossible. But Lina stayed close to her family. She didn't want cameras. She didn't want interviews. She just wanted to go home, eat dinner at her own table, and sleep in her own bed. The next morning, however, things changed. A representative from the National Transportation Safety Board personally visited Lina's home, asking her to attend a formal recognition ceremony. She didn't like the attention, but her grandfather told her gently, "You don't have to enjoy the spotlight, Mia Estrella. You only have to accept the gratitude being shown to you." So Lina agreed. A week later, she stood on a polished stage in a large auditorium filled with pilots, engineers, students, and reporters. The lights were bright, too bright, and her palms were sweaty as she looked at the unfamiliar sea of faces. The moderator introduced her as the youngest civilian in history to assist in the emergency landing of a commercial aircraft. The room erupted in applause. Lina felt her chest tighten. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a normal kid who had been put in a situation no child should ever face. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped up to the podium slowly. The microphone felt big, cold, and too high for her, so someone lowered it while she waited silently. She took a deep breath. I'm not very good at talking in front of people," she began, her voice small but clear. The crowd smiled gently. "I didn't save anyone because I'm brave. I didn't save anyone because I'm special. I just used what I learned from my grandfather. He taught me not to panic, even when things go wrong. He taught me how planes work, but he also taught me how to think." She glanced at her grandfather in the front row. His eyes were damp. "When the plane lost control, I was scared," she continued. "Really scared. My hands were shaking. My arms hurt a lot. I felt like I couldn't breathe. But I knew people needed help. And I knew I could at least try. I think that's what courage is. Not being fearless. Just trying even when you're scared." The audience remained silent, listening with deep attention. "I don't know if I want to be a pilot when I grow up," Lina said. "Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But I hope everyone here remembers one thing. What you learn matters. Even the things you think you'll never use. You never know when something small you learned could help someone. Or save someone." The room burst into applause. Many attendees stood as they clapped, moved by the honesty of her words. Lina stepped away from the podium, relieved it was over. She returned to her seat beside her family, and her grandfather placed his arm around her, whispering, "Perfect, me Nina." Months passed. Life slowly returned to normal. Reporters eventually stopped calling. The world moved on to new stories. Lina returned to school, to recess, to homework, to sleepovers. She laughed with her friends again. She drew pictures, played games, watched movies. She finally slept without waking from dreams of falling airplanes. But every now and then, She would hear the soft hum of a plane in the sky, and her heart would beat a little faster. Not from fear, but from memory. A reminder of the day she grew up too fast, yet refused to break. A reminder of the souls she guided safely to the ground. Pilots across the country began sharing her story in training classes. Flight attendants whispered it to each other during pre-flight briefings. Parents told their children about the brave girl in seat 22F who held the yoke with trembling hands but unshakable spirit. Her story became part of aviation history, not as a miracle, but as proof that knowledge and courage can rise from the smallest, quietest places. And though Lina wanted to be just a regular kid again, a part of her would always remain in that cockpit, a part she carried like a quiet, glowing strength. Because she had done something few